Broadcasting from Detroit's Cass Corridor, it's the Metro on WDET. I'm Tia Graham. This hour, we'll unpack the histories that live within the land and how artists are using those histories to tell stories for the next generation. And later on, Cade Cunningham has had an all-star year, and the Pistons are headed to the playoffs for the second year in a row. Yet, fans are nervous as the star recovers from a collapsed lung. We'll hear from a U of M doctor about what happened and the timetable for a return. We start the show exploring how the land and organic materials are tools for storytelling. There are stories that live in books, and then there are stories that live in the body, in the land, and in the materials we touch. Stories carried through generations, not always spoken, but always with us. What does it mean to inherit memory, not just as a story, but as a feeling? And what becomes possible when we treat art not just as an object, but as a living archive? Tonight, during the final evening of the Woodward lecture series, students and the public are invited to explore connections rooted in earth at College for Creative Studies. Ashara Ekundayo is a curator, cultural strategist, and space maker. Adebunmi Gbadebo is an artist whose work reaches into the earth itself to uncover the histories held within. Ashara will lead the conversation with Adebunmi, unpacking the histories embedded in land, material, and matter. I want to say thank you both for joining me on the Metro.
Oh, thank you for having us.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. So, Adebunmi, we're going to begin with you. Let's first talk about True Blue Plantation in South Carolina. It's where you found out your ancestors were enslaved and forced to produce indigo and rice, among other things.
Yes.
They arrived on the shores with knowledge and the skills to do the work already. What went through your mind when you found this personal connection?
Yeah, so apparently I was brought to True Blue Plantation as a baby,
Really?
but I don't actually have a memory of that. This was something that my mother told me. But when I was much older, maybe I'm 34 now, so maybe like around 26, my family was preparing to return again for a family reunion. And that was like the first time I became conscious of this connection to True Blue Plantation in Fort Mott, South Carolina. It's about 45 minutes from Columbia. And of course, being an African American, I'm half Nigerian, but this was my maternal Black American side. To have that connection, to be able to travel and with family, the descendants of that space was really moving. But also I thought it was, when learning about this was an indigo plantation as an artist, the fact that now it complicates your relationship to this color, that this beautiful color. And I feel like we think of colors as neutral, like not necessarily holding history, and especially one of violence and enslavement and kidnapping and, the Middle Passage. But it kind of really sent me down a loophole. And you talking about how my ancestors came with knowledge, I think that like deep awareness of that came when I went to True Blue for the first time. And I saw the red clay. That is like, we
Yes.
think of the Georgia red clay, but this clay is also in South Carolina. There's bright red clay. And the only time I remember seeing earth that red was in Nigeria. Wow. And it was like, I felt like I was on the continent. It brought me right back to that memory. And it was like, I guess, unpacking, this history that I knew, like, yes, like we knew how to work this land, what to do with this land, because there is a connection to them both,
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And just following up with that, Adebunmi, you were talking just a little bit, of course, about what you were able to discover. You're at about 26 years old when you're really opening your eyes and seeing how this all connects to yourself, what did you uncover that you are still trying to bring to life through that work?
Yeah, I guess I'm always trying to just uncover stories of ancestors. Originally in that initial research, I was relying heavily on the documents of the enslavers, so much of their history of, I mean, we even have archives of like what they ate for breakfast, like so much of their lives is documented. And I was like looking through their stories, their archives, their ephemera, their documents to uncover stories of my ancestors. And I was finding names, but they were coming up in these violent ways, right? Like in a will or appraisal list or a auction record. And there was something like really exciting one to like recover a name, that there was a name. It was like the confirmation that they did exist. But I was also having to parse through and deal with like the violence that came with that. So I think now I lean more heavily towards descendants, like family members also hold stories of their great great and their great great great, or stories that have been passed down. I look to the land, these headstones that are in the slave burial grounds also tell stories of who was buried, were they mother, father. So I think I always am like interested in trying to find stories of my ancestors, but I think as time has progressed, I am looking less to the ones who enslaved us and one to the ones who us, just looking towards us. Yeah.
And Ashara, I saw that you were like leaning into, because you're just like, yes, the history, unpacking that history, going through those documents and uncovering facts that you know to be true. Yet when you find those personal connections, it adds another layer to the pain, but also the understanding and possibly the working through some of that trauma. For you, Ashara, because you've also been working with just the past and trying to figure out a way to bring it to the present through art, but also through conversation. In what ways have you been able to unpack and uncover different knowledge from the past, especially our ancestors, the work that they were able to do, the skills that they brought with them, and brought that to where we are today?
Thank you for that question. I'm sitting here just kind of leaning into what Adebunmi is revealing. This storytelling, the impact and importance of being a storyteller and being a cultural worker and an artist. Who is also a memory worker. And so my curatorial practice, my archiving practice is also very much around the documentation and what has been left behind, whether it be ephemeral or oral, whether it be a taste as well. But I'm thinking about what has been revealed and what has been uncovered on purpose. But also what we find kind of like, in the ethers, something that was unexpected that, comes to light when I think about Adebunmi's work and my interest in not only, what she has found with the headstones or with the documents, the records, all of the pieces of paper. I'm just going to say that. There's also the memory of the work that comes from literally laying her body onto the earth and digging up soil and digging up clay and creating a story from the story that the earth has held all of this memory. The water has held all of this memory. So I'm also thinking about that as my own curiosities, my own art practice, but specifically the conversations that I've had with artists, particularly Black women and femme artists over the last almost 4 decades now, around what it means to be a storyteller, because what that does, and I was reading something about this a couple of days ago, being a storyteller, the impact of how it situates us in the life that we're living currently, but it also allows us to be in a space of revealing what is known, what is the ordinary, what is the extraordinary, and what is the unforeseeable, unimaginable. And so this work that we do as artists, that we do as curators, is also very important because it speaks to the fact that we were here and that we are going to continue to be here. We're not leaving. We're not going anywhere.
Ashara, thank you. Thank you for that so much. And I'm thinking of, once again, we're talking about the work that both of you actually do within this space. But I do want to bring Adebunmi back into the conversation because, Ashara, you were just talking about working with clay and how you work with the material and you're working with the land. You often work with materials like the soil and the clay, especially when we talk about South Carolina True Blue Plantation. How do these materials help you tell the stories words cannot tell? I mean, listening to you talk about the connection of the clay in the South as well as the clay and the dirt in Nigeria instantly filled my heart with so many different feelings because it's something I didn't know. I didn't know that those two shared that similarity.
Yeah, well, I mean, we already understand, like, on a scientific level, like, energy cannot be destroyed, right?
Yeah.
And that's same with spirit, and we walk this earth, but there is spirit and energy and information that is held within it, whether we want to engage that or, I mean, we do engage it, but whether we want to have a conscious engagement with that or not. So for me, working with the earth, either red clay as a material, cotton from True Blue Plantation, indigo from other spaces, the pine needles from those trees. I call the trees on True Blue Plantation the elders, like all of the information. I mean, they're the oldest witnesses of that land. They have information. So, I think, like Ashara said, there's power in just like laying your body across that land and digging that up. Like, information is coming up. Histories are coming up in a real way because I collect a lot of my soil from True Blue Cemetery, which is the burial ground that was established like in the 1700s for the enslaved. And that is a parcel on that plantation that my family still owns. So I'm like, in a real way, like their blood, their flesh, their sweat, everything is in that earth. And I do believe in a spiritual way, energetic way, physical way, all the ways that those histories are literally being unearthed. And I think like engaging with that energy and spirit, because it's so important that we do that. These are people that everything was trying to bury them, to try and cover them, to forget them. So when they see that kind of work happening, that engagement, the unearthing, I think in a lot of ways they lead me to the stories to like not complete, but to tell maybe more legibly these histories. Like I think my career and my practice is guided by them putting me in connection with the right people, like Ashara, like a descendant, like the people I need to be in contact with so that I could tell these stories more legibly and wholly. I think that's how these spirits and energies are also, I guess, giving back when they see this kind of unearthing.
Yeah, and they see the work that's being put in to preserve their memories and preserve them for the next generation as well. I have been recently learning about researching Harriet Tubman a little bit more, and how the land for her was also, it was like her Bible. It was like her religion, the land was, and how those trees spoke to her, and they probably still tell her story today, and we don't know, but, we're uncovering it slowly. You're listening to The Metro. I'm Tia Graham. Our guests are Ashara Ekundayo, a curator, cultural strategist, and space maker, and Adebunmi Gbadebo is an artist and an educator. We're getting a little bit of a sneak peek of tonight's conversation happening at College for Creative Studies during its Woodward lecture series. Now, I do want to get into quickly, we're going to go into a break, but I want to ask Ashara a quick question because Ashara, both you and Adebunmi connected through the color indigo. I remember when we had our conversation earlier, you were talking about that was just one of the things. It's just like, oh my gosh, I've been studying indigo as well and the impact of indigo. And here's this artist who's also doing the same thing. And, you know, indigo is often seen as this beautiful and calming color. But for both of you, it carries so much more weight. It's so much more history there. What does indigo mean to you personally, Ashara?
Adebunmi and I both have a love of the color indigo, the deep blue. There's something to really understand about all of us who live on planet Earth, is that it is actually planet water, and that the color blue is the color of this planet. It's the color of the sky. And so when you speak about your work as, I say, ancestor reverence, that we actually do this intentional work, that water, that the dark part of the ocean, the deepest part of the ocean is blue-black. It is the secrets, it's the information that gets downloaded when you intentionally ask to be in communion with your ancestors and with the angels, the Orisha, all of the energies that engage us, whether or not we are conscious about the engagement, that we are getting information, we're getting downloads, we're getting uploads. They come from the trees, from the soil, from the water. And so the water and the indigo are important, not only as a conversation around color theory, but as we speak about African traditional religions, as we speak about ancestors and African people, the importance of the plants, the germination of the seed, the taking care of the seed and the plant that is in some forms a toxic plant, but that this green plant creates this blue dye, and the importance of the blue dye for Black people, for African people. Our sister comrade has this beautiful new book, and we were speaking about Imani Perry and her book on blue. There's a line in the book where she says, "We have not always been Black, but we have always been blue." So this idea of race, this idea of Blackness identity, like we don't all call ourselves Black to this day. When I was just recently in Nigeria again,
yeah, they're like,
it's like, so, this idea of Blackness is a political identity. It is an identity of the African diaspora and how it has been used, as in celebration, but also, as a problem. So, we can get back to that, perhaps, but the idea of blueness, the idea of like being committed, to the root chakra, to the solar plexus, to the heart, and to the throat chakra, and the Ori, your like spirit chakra. So we're moving like from indigo to violet, we're moving from indigo to green, we're moving from green to orange to red. I'm just thinking about the importance of the spiritual upload and download and what happens at the space in your body when you touch the blue.
Ashara, you honestly just filled in a lot of blanks in my brain for some pieces that I was missing, especially when we talk about that transition and we're going through different points in our bodies and the way the color transitions. You just really unlocked a few things for me. So thank you very much. And we're going to continue talking about the color indigo and the importance of the color indigo, especially when we talk about the African diaspora, and we're going to dig more into what we were just talking about. But right now, we're listening to The Metro on WDET. I'm Tia Graham. My guests are Ashara Ekundayo, a curator and a cultural strategist, as well as an artist. And we also have Adebunmi Gbadebo. She's an artist as well as an educator, and she will be speaking tonight at the College for Creative Studies. It's going to be during the Woodward lecture series. That conversation begins at 5:30 p.m. You all stay right there. We will be right back. This is The Metro on 1019 WDET FM. I'm Tia Graham. We're rejoining a conversation exploring the significance of Indigo and the stories it tells. My guests are Ashara Ekundayo, a curator, cultural strategist, space maker, and so much more. We have Adebunmi Gbadebo, and she's an artist and educator as well. And we're getting a sneak peek of tonight's conversation that's happening at College for Creative Studies during its Woodward lecture series. Both will continue the conversation this evening as part of that series, like I said, and the audiences definitely don't want to miss out on that conversation. But jumping back into things, Ashara, we were talking just a little bit about Indigo before we left, and we were talking about the political nature that surrounds the term Black and Blackness, especially in this country. And you were breaking that down just a little bit. You know, how does that inform the way that we create?
Well, I think it informs because we agree that race is a thing, it's a construct that we move from in the United States. I mean, and many other places in the world, but I live here. And so I speak from that viewpoint as an African woman who lives, in the United States, born and raised in Detroit, Michigan. So we didn't get our what up though in, but what up though?
We didn't. What up though?
This badge that I hold with such pride, of being a Black woman, of being Black, and being like up for debate with anyone who wants to tell me that I'm not and tell me that they're not, for that matter. I think, one of the things that's deeply important about, let's say, the arts sector, about folks who live and make their living, as artists and creatives and cultural workers, period, is that we are navigating through white supremacy and all of the structures in the United States. So that also means the cultural sector. It means the arts sector. And, we try to pretend, I think, that it's not a real situation, but it really is. And that's why we name something Black art or African American art. Does it mean something to, have a market that all of a sudden a couple of years ago became deeply, invigorated by the idea of the production of art made by Black people, Black American people, and now I'd say even more contemporary African artists, African as in continental African artists as well. And what that financial success has meant also is that people are being able to create more spaces for more Black artists, on the continent and throughout the diaspora. And as we continue to connect that to, does it mean something? Is there a Black aesthetic? Yes. Is there anything that's, I think, unique about Black culture? Definitely. And, what we say in the United States, of course, is that we love Black culture. We just don't love Black people. But what the United States does actually export to the world is Black culture. Yeah. It is what we wear, what we eat, what we dance to, our music, everything about our creativity is actually the export of this country. And so when you travel, if you have the opportunity and the privilege, like some of us do, to be able to have, really deep conversations about culture, about appropriation, about the United States, it gets hairy because, we're navigating, immigration and migration and what that means and what is important. So, in our conversations around those of us who create and offer our creativity as our job, in the economy, like Adebunmi and so many other Black artists here in Detroit and throughout the U.S., what we know to be important is that we have to be able to navigate and control the narrative. And what we see is that there is a lot of gatekeeping that happens inside of the institutions, cultural community centers, but specifically institutions like museums, like universities, like colleges, that the gatekeeping is not controlled often by us, but the story is controlled by us. So that is what we have to make sure that we do, is to stay focused on that, to support each other, and to remember our ancestors, to tell those stories.
I'm thinking, and I'm listening to you, but I'm thinking about how it all connects to the exporting of goods, of labor. And I think about indigo, of course, and the production of indigo and how that helped fuel the U.S. economy when it was thriving during enslavement. It was king before cotton and before sugar. So
before tobacco,
before
sugar,
tobacco, it was indigo.
It was indigo. Why are we wearing indigo? Why is denim dyed indigo? Why are military outfits still indigo?
Why was it called slave cloth?
Why is it called slave cloth?
Indigo was once a global commodity tied to systems, like we just said. How do you approach working with this material, knowing it has such layered histories to it, knowing that when you touch this color, you see this color, it has that background? And we're going to start with you, Adebunmi.
For me, although it's especially directly looking at my lineage is connected to enslavement, I think of indigo as an inheritance. Indigo is a plant that is indigenous only on the continent of Africa and Asia. This was before indigo became popular. Woad, another plant, was the source of cultivating blue. And then it was discovered how indigo was a superior blue. And this wasn't something that could be produced in Europe, or in America. Indigenous people were dying through disease. So enslavers specifically went to those countries, went to the continent where we had the knowledge, the skill, the expertise, the history of cultivating this plant. And just to produce indigo, especially on those scales, is very complex. There's a fermenting process, there's growing the leaves, there's making vats. Ashara briefly touched on, this is a toxic plant, hence why a lot of indigo plantations, the life expectancy was around 7 years, because of how toxic and laborious this process was. And for me, we held that knowledge. We had the ability, which is why we were unfortunately stolen for that. And I think it's important to acknowledge all those factors, because this institution thrived on this belief that us African people have no culture, no knowledge, no expertise. There's a way in which enslavement is told that this was just through brute force labor, we were just used for our physical kind of, labor. And it's we were used for, we had it was our culture, our expertise, our knowledge, all of that we held. And me being Nigerian and also Black American, when learning about how essential and indigo was, it in a way it felt like it kind of joined my identities, what Ashara says before, quoting Imani Perry, that before we were Black, we were blue. There was a way in which I felt that this blue, this indigo, was a way of closing the gap between these two parts of me, of acknowledging that this was an inheritance, that this practice made its way to North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and we were at the heart of being able to grow it here. We built not just America, but the modern world as we know it because of this inheritance. Everything was taken from us, our names, our gods, we were taken from our land, our family, but that knowledge stayed with us in our body. We carried that with us, and we brought it here. So it definitely, when I think of indigo, it definitely feels like, yeah, this is my birthright. This is my inheritance, you know, and I'm really proud to be a worker, continuing the work of engaging and growing. I'm growing indigo in Philly.
It's amazing.
I feel really proud of like keeping this tradition.
It's so intense and it's so beautiful, and I'm still caught up in something you said a few minutes ago, which was a superior blue. You know, it's a superior blue to this other plant, and you know, being a primary color, it cannot be made except from this natural process. You know, and the inheritance of it. You know, there are those of us, I don't know how we have found each other, but we do, who are indigo children. You know, that's even a term. You know, I remember to be an indigo child is to birth an indigo child is to birth someone who is very special. This very, like, you know, ethereal, not necessarily angel-like, but this being that is very much still in contact with the ancestral world. So, you know, where we came from before we incarnated into a body and where we're going when we leave this body, like these indigo children, like, are tapped in. You know, they might have special abilities, and I just wonder I wonder where that term came from. And so this conversation is really encouraging me to go and find that. Who came up with that term, and why are we called that?
And why are we called
we called that?
Yes.
Yeah.
You're listening to The Metro. I'm Tia Graham. Our guests are Ashara Ekundayo, a curator, cultural strategist, and a space maker, among all the other things that she's doing right now. Adebunmi Gbadebo is an artist and an educator as well. We're getting a sneak peek of tonight's conversation between the both of them that's happening at College for Creative Studies during its Woodward Lectured series. Now, before we get out of here, because we've already we're getting down to the wire already.
I know, I'm like, we're about to wrap.
Yeah, we're wrapping up. I know. So, Ashara, sticking with you really quickly, you know, what responsibilities do you feel as a cultural steward, especially as someone who wants to amplify collective memory? You know, what does that weight feel like, if it feels like weight at all?
It's definitely weight, you know, but it's heavy and I can carry it. You know, there are weights that are like that make you feel as though, okay, I just can't go on one more day. But, you know, this is a history and an inquiry and inheritance that excites me, you know. And then, you know, we get to connect why it is also that Black people named a sound a color. The blues. How does that also unfold? I see the look on your face, and I wish everyone could see kind of like the lights that are going off around your head because I'm watching it. But like there's something to this, you know. So the weight of that responsibility, you know, I'm also been learning over the last 15 years about the blues. You know, it's a musical form that is kind of the root of all Black music, of all American music, and it comes from us. It comes from our angst. It comes from our struggle. But, you know, what I don't want for us to miss, and I know that, you know, we will also speak about this evening, is actually the joy and kind of like the glory of understanding and celebration of blue, of the plant itself, indigo, of our ability to be art workers and makers and creators who are also like, make it blue. You know, if you want it to shine, if you want people to love it, if you want it to pop, if you want it to sell, make it blue. We all know this because it's the color of this planet and we are earthlings. So I don't want us to miss kind of the joy-informed pedagogy, you know, and epistemologies of the blues, you know, not necessarily the blues genre musically, but the blues multi-interdisciplinary understanding of color, of soil, of water, of memory. I don't want us to forget those opportunities as well. So I'm looking forward to having some joyful conversation as well about working the land, gathering the story, growing the plant, and the reveal of it. Because have you ever been to like a tie-dye party?
Yes.
Anybody ever?
Yes.
Right? And then you fold everything up and and then you tie it up, and then you dip it, and you dip it, and you dip it, and then you pull it out. The reveal of the beauty of that and what happens to your body, it engenders delight. So there's also that opportunity for us to speak about indigo and blue from that making and that memory, because it is an absolute mastery. And as you said, this plant only indigenously grows in two places. Think about the relationship between Nigeria and Japan. Think about, the relationship between the colors, the names, and the patterns that are used to describe blue, to describe indigo, shibori, and tie-dye. So what is the history of that? That's a whole nother story, a whole nother show.
I was going to say, that is a whole
I'm not going to go down the
show.
road, but I invite you all.
That color connects us all over this planet. It connects us
all over the planet. In Mexico, in Japan, in Nigeria, all over the planet. Everyone wants blue because it's who we are.
Yeah, I don't have anything. I was going to have a follow-up question there, but I'm just going to end the conversation so that folks who are interested in continuing this conversation that you're hearing right now on the Metro, you can stop by tonight. The College for Creative Studies is the Woodward Lecture Series. The conversation begins at 5:30 p.m. Yes, it does. So we have Ashara Ekundayo, a curator, cultural strategist, and space maker, artist extraordinaire. We have Adebunmi Gbadebo. She's also an artist who reaches into the earth itself to uncover the histories held within. I want to say thank you both so much for stopping by the Metro and entertaining this amazing conversation that we were able to explore the plant indigo and how blue rules.
Amen.
Thank you so much for inviting us.
Of course.
Yes, so fun.
Coming up, the Pistons are headed to the playoffs. However, Cade Cunningham still out on the jury with a collapsed lung. We'll hear from a doctor and learn a little bit more about what's going on with Cade Cunningham. You all stay right there.